Mitzvas Vidui U'Teshuvah, the mitzvah of confession and teshuvah. What have we learned so far? We learned that the mitzvah of teshuvah, for the process to process correctly. Why does the process have to process correctly? Because we must rectify and fix what we have done to the extent where it's a total healing and nothing remains of what was done. To do that correctly, we need to have azivas achet, abandoning sin. I realized I did something wrong. I vow that I will never do it again. I have deep charata, deep regret, remorse, because that will also ensure that I never do it again. Vidui, I confess. Confession is a positive commandment. We must verbalize what we did wrong. And then once we've done that part of the process, now we could ask for forgiveness. So it's not just the physical actions that we need to undertake. It's also because if a person transgresses, the action creates a form and entity. The pleasure that they felt at the time of the transgression creates some sort of enlivening aspect, soul aspect. We need both of those to go away. Because as we saw, if a person transgresses, these transgressions surround them and they follow them around and they cause trouble for them and they follow them past this world. So we want everything to be totally gone, wiped away like a cloud. The mitzvahs are connected to the name of Avaya. So when we do what we're supposed to do, we draw down the infinite light, goes through all the stages it's supposed to go to, eventually will enliven and nurture the world. If we do what we're not supposed to, it's V'nayke Shem Avaya, we create a puncture. It's like a bleeding wound and everything gets messed up on that level. To rectify, you have to go to a level that's higher than that, because everything in this level of the Mitzvas Avaya, everything at the level, which is kind of what we see as the 10 attributes, in that system, it's now messed up. So we got to sterilize the wound, we got to stem the bleeding, and then we can fully heal. Again, healing to the point where nothing remains. We don't want a scar, we don't want anything wiped away like a cloud, because the world was created to do the mitzvahs and also to draw down the slide to keep the world going as it should be. What is powerful enough to sterilize, clean the wound, stem the bleeding, etc., all the kind of stuff, is teshuvah. Teshuvah is a panacea healing agent. Why is teshuvah so powerful? Because teshuvah is tapping into a level that's going to be above the level of Mitzvas Avaya. What is the level that is above the level of Mitzvas Avaya? I am he who erases your transgressions. What is the level of I? The two levels of I is the level of Keser. Keser, like a crown, goes above the intellect. So we're going to a much higher level. What is higher than the 10 attributes? 10 attributes, you have the 3 intellectual faculties, the 7 emotive faculties. What is even higher than both of those? Which, even just intellect, we think, oh, the intellect's the highest of everything. This is what defines man. This is what makes us so wonderful, is that we have an intellect. No, there's something that can override the intellect, that goes deeper than that. And what goes deeper than that? The level of Keser, crown, above the head. That is the level of desire, want, will, ratzon. What motivates your desire and your will is delight, tainug. So essentially, this entire world was created because God, for whatever reason, decided he was going to delight in creation. Thereby he wants creation, thereby we have creation. For him, it's an instantaneous process. For us, there is a process. If I decide I like something, so I want it, so I have to go for it. For us to sort of understand, we have to break it all down to the different levels. So if we see a progression. What are these two levels? We have other terminology for this level of desire and delight. We have what's called atik yamin, removed from the days. It is so far beyond and above the attributes, which are the building blocks of creation. This is a level that when we draw down this light, it's such a bright light that the negative force is scattered. This is how we sterilize the wound, per se. And then you have a level that's called arach anpin. That's the level of our will. That is the source of the emanations. That's where eventually everything is going to come from. And this is a level that can rectify. These two levels seem to be too far removed from us. How can we access them? They're so wondrous. How can we even get there? This mitzvah, what is this mitzvah? The mitzvah of teshuvah. It's not so wondrous for you as in reaching the level that seems to be so wondrous level is not difficult for you to access it. And it's not distant from you. It's not far from you. This level that seems to be so far away beyond intellect, beyond the sea of chachma, is not so far away from you. You, as an individual here on this earth, because of where you ultimately come from, which is Adam Kadmon, primeval man, because you come from where everything else comes from, that is why you can rectify everything, and that's why this stuff is not so far from you. Because you're coming from where Atik and Arach, where they draw from, that's really, really where you come from. About that is God's infinity. That's how we get to the point where we talk about Slach lana avinu kechatanu, forgive us our Father because we sinned. That's not a reason for forgiveness. That's a reason why you need to ask for forgiveness, but it is a reason for forgiveness in the sense of return us to you in full teshuvah when we process the process correctly. We have absolute teshuvah. Because to rectify, we have to go to a much higher level. We have to dig deeper within ourselves to reach a higher level. And that only happened because of transgression. So this, which was a negative, and because of the negative thing that we did, that is now the impetus for reaching a much higher level. First of all, because it draws us closer to God. So yes, we're saying, please forgive us because of this. Hey, we did the tshuva process and now we're much closer to you. Now we can ask your forgiveness. And not just that, because this negative thing was now the impetus to drawing closer, this now becomes a merit for us. And that is how we have the idea of how a Baal tshuva, someone who does tshuva, could stand at a level that's higher than the tzaddikim, than the righteous. In this regard, the righteous are operating on the level of mitzvahs avaya. They didn't mess up. There's no puncture. There's no wound. People who mess up, because they went down, they rise much higher. They have to go to the level above it. We even saw last time examples of how powerful Teshuvah is, specifically in this world, but we saw how powerful it is that even for 1 second, if someone tries to betroth a woman on the condition that he's a tzaddik, even if that person seems to be a total Rasha before and after, but one thought of Teshuvah is enough to have totally switched them around. Then we saw the story of Rabbi Elazar ben Derdaya. He went around sleeping with everybody, and yet when he did Teshuvah to the level, not just that he gets the world to come, but he's called Rabbi Elazar ben Derdaya. That's how powerful Teshuvah is, but Teshuvah specifically for this world. In the next world, we saw from the Zohar, quote unquote, there's no counting, there's no reckoning, etc. Things cannot be changed in the next world. This is the world where we can effect change. Not just change, but an absolute 180 sort of change. An absolute turnaround kind of change. Teshuvah is that powerful. Now we got to the point of the Tzemech Tzedek is going to reference a Maamar of the Alter Rebbe. The Tzemech Tzedek says, you can discover this further in the Alter Rebbe's Maamar, and we'll just summarize it in brief. And there's a bunch of stuff that comes. So the Maamar, continuing on all this, the idea about how in this world we could change, in the next world we can't, because the next world is set. This is the Maamar from the Alter Rebbe that was said in the year 5565, Hebrew year. And it's based on the verse from Bamidbar, Tavis Pnei Sol, Varmat Elem, Es Kabane Lachmi, Liishai, Reach Nechochi, Tishmer Lakav Li B'moado. Command the children of Israel and say to them, I sacrifice my food for my fire offerings, a spirit of satisfaction for me, you shall take care to offer to me at its appointed time. Here we're focusing on two explanations that are within the Maamar. It's talking about this idea of why is it that in this world we can change and in the next world things are set. It says, because this world is a world that stems from chesed, from kindness. How do we see that? We have a verse from Tehillim. Ki amarti olam chesed yibana shamayim tachen emunascha v'hem. For I said, forever will the world be built with kindness, as the heavens with which you will establish your faithfulness. Ki amarti olam chesed, olam, world, chesed, yibana, that this world would be built with kindness. Here's the verse from Tehillim. It's talking about this world that we live in is a world that's built on kindness. Versus the world to come, another verse from Tehillim. To make known to the children of men his mighty deeds and the glory of the majesty of his kingdom. His mighty deeds, gvurosa. The word of gvura is in there. Gvura, which means might or strength, which you've already seen, things like that. And it says that's referring to the heavens, to the upper, to the higher realms. So the higher realms stem from gvura, the lower realms stem from arud and chesed. Also from Tehillim, the attribute of kindness is concealed in the higher realms. All the attributes exist in some form and every level. It just some dominate. So we're talking about in the higher realms, Gevurah dominates, and in the lower realms, Chesed dominates. There is Chesed in the higher realms, but Chesed, this idea of kindness, is hidden in the higher realms. How do you see that in another verse from Tehillim? How abundant is your goodness that you have hidden away for those who fear you. They have worked for those who take refuge in you in the presence of the sons of men. And it says, oh look, the goodness that you have hidden away for those who fear you. As in, when will become time for those who fear you to get your reward, etc. This kindness has been hidden away for them. There is chesed in the higher realms, but it's kept hidden. As in, this is not the dominating factor here. This is from Tanya Igeres Teshuvah. As Rambam writes in the introduction to his commentary on Iyov, which is Job, that even the sufferings of Iyov for 70 years bear absolutely no comparison to the suffering of a soul for even 1 hour in Gehenna. For physical fire is but 1/60th of the fire of Gehenna. So first of all, what we're seeing here is that whatever is in this world, in the next world, it's that much more intense. It is only that this world is built by kindness, for which reason through mild suffering in this world, we want to save from severe judgments in the world to come. As in the whole story of Job, however much you know about it, but that's kind of the iconic story of the ultimate human suffering. That everything just went wrong for him. And yet he still had faith in God, etc. Now, it says that 70 years, all of his years of suffering, cannot even compare to 1 hour of Gehenna, as in when it comes time for the spiritual punishment. That's how terrible Gehenna is. That doesn't seem to jive then. Ultimately, what we're getting to is that any sort of teshuvah would rectify for all of it, so you wouldn't have to go through all that. But not just that, because this world, Olam Chesed Yibana, which we just saw from Tehillim, is that even if someone just goes through a mild suffering, as in compared to what Gehenna would be, that suffering is enough to cleanse them. You don't have to go through the intensity of Gehenna if someone suffers in this world, which is an act of kindness. Chapter 26 of Tanya, which talks about how do I deal with stuff when everything sucks. Part of the idea of it is we have to understand where is the suffering coming from, in the sense that the fact that you're going through hardship is not necessarily punishment. It could be an act of drawing you closer to God, which is obviously a high level to achieve, but that's ultimately the view of suffering and hardship. Not for us to tell somebody else, God forbid, but for us to assess on our own thing. Through this hardship that I'm going through, I could strengthen my faith in God, I could refine myself, etc., etc. So that's part of why this idea of that suffering in this world is kindness, because the cleansing it does, the drawing close that it does, and it's not anything compared to what the world to come is. This is analogous to the movement of a shadow on earth of a hand's breadth, which equals the sun's movement in the sky at thousands of miles. You watch the sun go from east to west, okay, that went from this side of the house to that side of the house. And really, it's like how many millions of miles is it traveling in that time? To say a small movement down here is equal to massive movement up there. Here it's talking about in the sense of suffering, but we know this is true also in the sense of a mitzvah. Any good thing that you do down here, the ripple effects in the higher realms is massive. massive. So you think, oh, what is this one bracha that I'm saying? Here, it's just a few lines, a few words, but up there, massive, massive ripple effects above. Infinitely more so is this true in the parallel, the descent of the worlds from level to level, from the most exalted heights until this physical world. Which also, try to fathom, the world that we have is so unfathomable, so think of the source of where it's coming from. It's exponentially greater in the sense of the majesty of where we're coming from is exponentially greater than whatever the world that we can imagine down here. Any event in this world results from a parallel but far more ethereal event that previously took place in the spiritually exalted world. Thus, the effect of an event in this physical world is much greater in those lofty worlds. So massive movement above, by the time it gets down here, it's smaller, which again, even if it's something that's massive down here, it's that much greater up there. We see this in the teachings of the Zohar on the elevation of the higher worlds as a result of the spiritual awakening initiated by man below through his offering of one fowl, a dove or pigeon, or a handful of meal on the altar. Zohar teaches that offering but one such representative creature from the animal world, or but one such representative item from the vegetative world elevates all the spiritual realms. Here it's talking about a carbon. If someone brings a bird as a carbon, all of a sudden you've elevated entire realms. All I did is bring your pigeon. It has massive effects. We should be awed by this and appreciative of this. Such are the effects of all the mitzvah requiring practical performance as known from the result. That's also why we want to emphasize practical action. Because something in your thoughts is nice for your own refinement, but it doesn't impact the physical world, also with all the levels of elevation that occur. We were speaking with the class last time. That's part of why when it comes to prayer and Torah study, you want to verbalize it. Because you want to get those words out there. Massive effects. Mitzvah performed in this world with physical objects such as tzitzit made of wool, the passages of the tefillin written on parchment have far-reaching reverberations in the exalted spiritual world. We have no clue. Certain things that we make such a big deal for us, if you could only envision the exponential effect that occurs above, you would realize what a small request is being asked of you. Comparatively speaking. This too is our sage's comment on the verse, sanctify yourselves and you shall be holy. Viskadishtem v'yisem kedoshim. A man sanctifies himself only a little, commas the Rebbe in quantity below, i.e. commas the Rebbe in quality, and he becomes sanctified in great measure from above. As in, you do one small action here to refine yourself, and from above, it's going to be way more, way bigger from above. It was thus noted above in reference to the phrase, who sanctified us with his commandments, that Israel's sanctification through mitzvahs is bound up with the infinite life force that encompasses and transcends all worlds. Thus, the physical performance of a divine commandment in this world draws down upon the individual holiness not only from the loftiest spiritual worlds, but also from godliness that transcends worlds. When we do a mitzvah here below, we're not just drawing through the regular system. We're drawing down light that can't even be contained within a system. We have no idea. By the way, it's part of it also. The fact that we have no idea is part of how we can access it, because we could fully understand it, we wouldn't be able to handle it. Precisely so is it in reference to reward and punishment. As our sages say, the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah. As in, the reward is the spiritual illumination that is drawn down through the fulfillment of the mitzvah itself, as discussed elsewhere. This knowledge is elementary to the discerning, and those with intelligence in this matter will discover good. The reward for the performance of a mitzvah infinitely surpasses the physical deed itself. The punishment as well suffered by an individual in this world for his sins substitutes for a far greater measure of punishment than the person would have undergone in the world to come. So it works in both directions. You do a mitzvah here, the reward is immeasurable. But here, comparatively speaking, a small amount of suffering rectifies in great measure. The performance of a mitzvah draws down as a reward divine illumination that utterly transcends all world. When we say transcends the world, it means that it's something that cannot be contained within the world. It follows that the reward for the mitzvah in the loftier spiritual worlds is infinitely higher than the physical action performed here below. This section from Tanya is to teach us, for lack of a better word, it's here to teach us the ratio of actions here below and what that looks like in the spiritual realms. To ultimately lead us to the fact that down here it's a world of chesed, that all you have to do is a small thing and there's massive reverberations. On the flip side of it, comparatively speaking, just a little bit of suffering here is equal to a great measure of suffering in the spiritual realms. This is a world of kindness. Versus the world of Gevura, which is the world to come, that's a world of black and white. There's rigidity in those worlds. So you don't get away with this kind of stuff in those higher realms. Which leads us back to the point that Teshuvah happens in this world. It can affect massive, massive changes in this world. In the world to come, souls bask in the overt revelation of radiance of the Shekhinah, allowing for some measure of comprehension of Hashem's oneness by created being. This is only possible through Gevura and Tzimtzum, contracting divine light so it can be perceived by the soul, a created limited entity. Talk about what is it in the world to come, they bask in the divine presence. Part of the idea that is, for them to be able to bask in it, it has to be condensed. Because if it's too bright and it's too much, then the souls aren't entities anymore. Like you tan in the sun, but you don't go up to the sun to tan. You need to be very much removed from the sun to be able to sit in the sun. So there's an idea that somehow having a revelation also mandates that there has to be a contraction. Because to show you something, I have to mitigate it to a level that you could actually get it. So on the one end, I'm seeing it, I can appreciate on a higher level what I'm seeing because I actually get to see it. But at the same time, the very fact that I can see it means that it's been highly condensed for me to be able to take it in. The glory of the majesty of his kingdom, the verse that we saw from Tehillim, is revealed to man through his acts of gvura, tzimtzum, as we just explained. The light of the world to come is mamale kol omen. We've seen this phraseology before. Fills all worlds. Each of us have, and every created entity has a very specific life force for that thing. That means that is a divine light that I can take in. I can package it somehow. adapting to various levels of existence and resulting in different levels of light revelations as per the vessels, but never total concealment. In Kabbalah, it's called an or pnimi, an internal light. So this idea of Mimalik kol almin, the light that fills all worlds, means that according to the vessel, that's how much light it can give each thing. How much water can I pour into a cup versus into a tub versus into a sink versus this? Each one has water in it according to what it could hold. So Mimalik kol almin, all the worlds have a certain amount of divine light, and not just the worlds, all creations have a certain amount of divine light according to what you could hold. So on the one hand, you have the divine light. On the other hand, it has to be mitigated for you to be able to contain it somehow. That's what we refer to when we talk in the spiritual realms. In this world, we do have a level of Mamalik, but we're talking about now certain dominating aspects. In this world, godliness is concealed. Godliness is not evident. Higher spiritual realms, godliness is evident. To be able to see godliness, it has to be mitigated. Here, we don't see God because it's totally concealed. Godliness is concealed, indicating the source is from a higher level of light, which is what we call Soviv Kalamin. It surrounds our world. An Or Makif is an encompassing light, a light too powerful to be condensed into a framework, structure, or vessel, which may not be concealed, thereby stemming from Chesed, balanced divine generosity. The fact that we can't see God in this world is not proof of absence. It's proof of a higher level of light that cannot be contained. There's not a vessel that can hold this light because it's too great for it. Thereby, godliness is not evident, which means not that God is not here. It means that this light is not packageable. To see it, it has to be condensed somehow. This light is too great to be condensed. That's why that's the dominating light within this world. A light that cannot be apportioned. Apportionment speaks to Gevura, Tzimtzum, strength. Is a Gibor who is a strong man, someone who contains himself. For the light to be real, it has to be contained somehow. Now we're talking about a higher level of light that can't be contained. This is going to get to this idea of accessing this higher level of light, which is part of how this is a world where changes can happen. Because there's not containment. There's not a definition to the light. Because the light is not defined, that means the light can be anything. And when it can be anything, we can make changes. It's unbelievable. Okay, this is from Psachim. So this is from the Gemara. Incidental. So it's in the middle of a discussion, cropping it from a discussion. Incidental to the discussion of leaving Yerushalayim and its surrounding area, the Gemara cites expositions of a prophetic passage, including a statement that Hashem will eventually expand the boundaries of Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. The verse states, "And it shall come to pass on that day that there shall not be light but heavy clouds, Yikard and thickness v'kiparon," which is from the prophet Zechariah. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the expression Yikard v'kiparon? This seems to be a very interesting verse. It shall come to pass on that day there will not be light but heavy clouds and thickness, which is all bound up in a prophecy. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, these are people who are considered important. So it's taking the word Yakarim, which here it translated Yakar as clouds, and it says Yakar, which is precious, so important. In this world, and unimportant, Kifuim, in the world to come. So Kipon took the word Kifuim. Here they seem very important, but the world to come, not so important. To say, this is like the incident involving Rav Yosef, son of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who became ill and was about to expire. He was about to pass away. When he returned to good health, his father said to him, what did you see when you were about to die? He said to him, I saw an inverted world. Those above, i.e. those who are considered important in this world, were below, insignificant, while those below, i.e. those who are insignificant in this world, were above. He said to him, my son, you have seen a clear world. Alam Bar Isa. The world you have seen is the true world. As in that world, people's standings befit them. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked, and where are we the Torah scholars there? Rabbi Yosef responded, just as we regarded here, so are we regarded there. So it's taking the word barer and birer, refined versus clear, which is our job in this world is to refine the world, which we'll get into next time. But let's just finish with this part from the Gemara. It's taking this verse of the clouds, Yikarim, Yikapan, it's saying, what is this related to? And again, how does this have to do with everything? This world, because anything can happen, we can misunderstand people standing within this world. Also because any standing can change at all. Rabbi Yosef was about to die, and he says he saw a glimpse of the world to come. What did you see there? He said, I saw that people who we think are not important, they're actually very important up there. People who think are very important down here are not that important up there. So everything was mixed up. He says it wasn't mixed up. It was clarified. You saw a clear world. You saw the truth of everything up in that world. Because in the world of Gevura, it's a world of definition. It's a world where everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. It's a defined world. And definition, by definition, it's a containment. This is what it is. So what you saw in the world to come, you saw a defined world. You saw the truth. What's really important, what's not necessarily important. Versus down here, we can't necessarily tell. Also because this is a world where everything's in flux. Because this is the world of Chesed. Which again, this is a world where we could change stuff. Teshuvah could change because this world of Chesed is a world in flux. The world to come, there's no changing. It's a very clear and defined world. You can't change there. But here it's using it as the example of saying the way we regard people, who we think is important here or not, everything seemed to be mixed up. No, everything was clear. This is connected to Teshuvah. And now I'm going to sidetrack for a second. Please God, I will always remember how a couple weeks after October 7th, my dad, he quoted this Gemara speaking about Ben Shimoni. God should avenge his blood because he was talking about how Ben, well, this is a year ago, but from the year before that, he was at a Simchas Torah because he had come out for his cousin's wedding. Just goes to show, like, I don't remember. I guess I met him, I saw him, like, I had no memory. He's like, oh, you don't remember him? Like, we were dancing, this quiet guy. So he used this story to say, a little bit quieter, he had his things, he seems like a regular guy, and then he went and he saved so many people's lives. This is a world that's a mixed up world. You don't know. You see people and you have no clue. First, you have no clue what they're capable of. This guy in the last hours of his life did more than someone will accomplish in their entire lifetime, saving all these lives, and gave up his life saving these lives. His cousin was saying he had gone down to Ashkelon to his mom. He was going to go to the Novus Fest festival the next morning. He's like, oh, I'll stay here the night. And through doing that, he actually saved his mom and his sister's life because they were going to be down Kfar Aza or something, and the people they were going to be at were murdered. So he even started, just from the night before, already started saving lives. And in this world, you're like, oh, he's just a regular guy. This world is the really opposite world. In the world to come, who can imagine what a soul like that is in the world to come? That's a clear world. And this is the mixed-up world. So, to say that for Ben.